The boardroom smelled like ambition and expensive cologne. 42 floors above the city of Atlanta, the glass walls caught the morning light and threw it across a long, mahogany table where 12 people sat waiting. Some checked their phones. Some adjusted their ties. One woman sat perfectly still. Her name was Zara Mitchell, 34 years old. Natural hair pulled back in a clean bun. A navy blazer that she'd pressed the night before because the dry cleaner hadn't come through in time. She didn't fidget. She didn't smile at the other executives the way some people do when they're nervous. That tight, performative smile that says, "Please like me." Zara didn't need to be liked. Not anymore. The door at the far end of the room opened, and he walked in. DeShawn Carter. Same jawline. Same confident stride. Same way of walking into a room like he already owned it, except this time he didn't. This time, the room belonged to Zara. The company belonged to Zara. Every seat at that table, every decision made in that building ran through her. DeShawn hadn't gotten the memo yet, or maybe he had. Maybe that's why his steps slowed, just slightly, when he saw her sitting at the head of the table. His eyes did the thing eyes do when the brain refuses to process what it's seeing. A flicker, a recalibration. He sat down. Zara watched him open his portfolio, watched him uncap his pen, watched him do everything in his power to look unbothered. She let him. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm and clear as river water. "Let's get started. Before we go further, if this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. We tell the whole truth. 6 months ago, nobody in corporate Atlanta knew Zara Mitchell's name. 6 months ago, she was a mid-level marketing strategist at Elevate Media Group, a firm that worked with brands, built campaigns, and quietly made other people look brilliant, while the people doing the real work stayed invisible. That was Zara's life. Invisible work, visible results, no credit. Her manager at the time was a man named Kendrick Osei. Sharp, political, always 3 conversations ahead of everyone else. He recognized talent when it walked through the door. He'd hired Zara 7 years earlier, and he'd told her on her first day, "You're going to either run this place or build something better. I don't know which, but I'm watching." She'd laughed. She wasn't laughing now. She was running it. But the road from that first day to this boardroom, that road had a toll, and the toll had a name, DeShawn Carter. He joined Elevate Media Group 4 years ago as a senior account director. He came in with credentials, MBA from Emory, a LinkedIn profile with enough endorsements to wallpaper a hallway, and a laugh that made rooms feel warmer. He was the kind of man who made you feel chosen just by paying you attention. Zara felt chosen. That was her first mistake, not the last. They started as colleagues, then friends, then something harder to name. Late nights in the office finishing pitches, sharing takeout over spreadsheets, building strategies that won accounts worth millions. Zara would come up with the concept. DeShawn would present it. That was the arrangement. Unofficial, unspoken, and deeply, quietly unfair. She told herself it was partnership. She didn't ask why she was never in the room when he presented. She didn't ask why the bonuses kept landing in his account. She told herself, this is how it works. He has the relationships. I have the ideas. We're a team, but teams share the credit. Zara, DeShawn said one evening in November 3 years ago, standing in the doorway of her office with that smile she trusted more than she should have. "The Meridian Brands pitches tomorrow. I need the full deck by tonight." She looked up from her laptop. She was already working on it. "I know," she said. "Like, all of it. The consumer data breakdown, it's the 3-year projection, the cultural relevance segment." "DeShawn, I know." He nodded, satisfied, and started to leave. Then stopped, turned back. "And hey, you're incredible, you know that?" She'd smiled. She hadn't known then what that compliment cost him to give, or what he was taking in exchange. Quick pause. If you're feeling this story already, hit that like button right now. It helps more than you know. And stay with me, because we're only just getting to the part where everything unravels. The Meridian Brands pitch won the account. $12 million, the biggest single acquisition in Elevate Media Group's history at that point. DeShawn stood in front of the entire company at the celebratory lunch and gave a speech about vision and strategy and what it meant to be part of a great team. He did not say Zara's name. Us, not once. She sat 3 seats away from him at the table, eating her chicken, watching the applause wash over him like water over stone. Kendrick caught her eye from across the room. His expression said, "I see it, but seeing isn't the same as doing something." After the lunch, Zara went back to her office and closed the door. She didn't cry. She wasn't that kind of woman. She sat at her desk and she opened her laptop and she started outlining the next pitch. Because the work had to keep moving. Because the work was the one thing she could control. That was the day the slow burn started. She just didn't know yet what she was burning toward. The relationship between Zara and DeShawn deepened over the following year. That's the part people don't understand when they hear this story. They want to draw a clear villain from the first scene. They want the betrayal to be obvious. But real betrayal, the kind that costs you something permanent, it doesn't announce itself. It grows inside something that looks like love. It feeds on your trust like it has a right to be there. Zara and DeShawn became a couple officially in the second year of working together. Her mother, Zara Mitchell, said, "I don't like how he looks at you. Mama, you don't like how anyone looks at me." "That's not true. I like Marcus. I like Damien. I like Kendrick, your boss. But DeShawn, baby, that man looks at you like you're something he found, not something he chose." Zara dismissed it. She was 30 years old. She was in love. She was good at her job and growing in her career, and she had a man who, when he smiled at her in the right light, made all of that feel like enough. She dismissed it. So the sacrifices started small. She turned down a recruitment call from a competitor firm, a lateral move that might have opened doors. Because DeShawn said, "Why would you leave when things are going so well for us here?" Us. She caught that, thought it was sweet. She passed on a professional development conference in New York because DeShawn had planned a weekend trip the same weekend and said, "You can always go next year." She gave him 2 years' worth of strategy notes, documented, detailed, irreplaceable, because he said his personal files had been corrupted and the pitch was in 3 days, and, "You know this stuff better than anyone, Z. I just need something to work from." She gave them freely. She gave him everything freely because she thought they were building something together. Drop your city in the comments right now. Where are you watching this from? Because I want to know who's writing with us tonight. Atlanta, Chicago, London, Lagos? Let me know. The night it broke, the actual night, the moment when the foundation cracked all the way through, was a Tuesday. The company was hosting a donor gala. Black tie, rooftop, the kind of event where the right conversation could reshape your entire trajectory. Zara had spent 3 weeks organizing the event logistics alongside the actual client. She'd managed vendors, designed the program, coordinated the entertainment, and written the talking points for every executive who was going to speak that night. She wore a gold dress. Her mother had picked it. "If you're going to be invisible anyway," Claudette had said, sharp and loving at the same time, "you might as well be a beautiful kind of invisible." She walked in on DeShawn's arm. Things were fine, until the moment Marcus Webb, the firm's largest investor, pulled DeShawn aside at the bar and said loudly enough for half the room to hear, "Your team's work on the Meridian campaign was brilliant, the cultural strategy segment especially. Who wrote that?" There was a pause. 1 second. 2. DeShawn smiled. "That was all me. I have a gift for reading cultural moments." Zara was standing right there, 3 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water. She looked at DeShawn. DeShawn looked at Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb sipped his drink and nodded approvingly. And nobody in that circle, looked at Zara. She set her glass down on a passing tray. She walked to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Then she walked back out, and she smiled for the rest of the night. But something in her had made a decision. Let me take you back further, because the gala wasn't the beginning. The gala was just the night Zara finally admitted to herself what she'd been refusing to see. The truth had been there for years, quiet, patient, waiting for her to look at it directly. So let's go back. Let's go back to before DeShawn. before Elevate Media Group, before Atlanta. Let's go back to Columbus, Georgia, and a girl named Zara Mitchell who grew up in a house where sacrifice was just called love. Her father, Ronald Mitchell, worked 2 jobs from the time Zara was 6 until she left for college. He drove a city bus Monday through Friday. He worked security at a hospital on weekends. He never complained. When Zara asked him once, she was maybe 9, "Daddy, don't you get tired?" He looked at her with those steady eyes and said, "I get tired every day, but tired and done are 2 different things." She remembered that. She carried it the way you carry something you don't realize is heavy until you set it down. Her mother, Claudette, cleaned houses during the week and did hair on the weekends out of their kitchen. She was precise and proud, and she taught Zara 3 things above everything else. Be better than they expect. Never beg. And know your worth before someone else tries to price you. Zara had been an average student until 9th grade, when an English teacher named Mr. Delaney handed back an essay she'd written about her father and said, in front of the whole class, "This is the only paper I've given a perfect score to in 11 years of teaching." She'd looked up. "You have a mind, Zara," he'd said. "Don't you dare waste it." She hadn't. She got into Clark Atlanta on a partial scholarship and worked the rest. Waitressing, tutoring. One summer doing data entry for a medical office that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken fluorescent lights. She graduated with a degree in communications and a 3.8 GPA and exactly $340 in her bank account. No connections, no safety net. Just her mind and her mother's voice in her ear. Know your worth. Her first job out of college was at a small marketing firm downtown. She was an assistant. She made the coffee. She formatted presentations. She stayed late without being asked because she was studying. Not the work, the people. How decisions got made. Who got credit? Who got passed over? What separated the people who moved up from the people who stayed still? She spent 3 years there. She learned everything she could. Then she left. She was 26 when she walked into Elevate Media Group for her interview. Kendrick Osei sat across from her and asked her one question for the first 45 minutes. "Tell me how you think." Not what she knew, not where she'd worked, not her strengths and weaknesses. "Tell me how you think." She talked for 45 minutes and then stopped herself and said, "I'm sorry. I know that was a lot." Kendrick said, "Don't apologize. That's the best answer I've gotten to that question in 6 years." He hired her on the spot, and for 7 years she built. She built quietly and steadily and without noise. She developed a reputation inside the firm as someone who could solve problems that didn't have clean answers. When a campaign was failing, they brought it to Zara. When a client was about to walk, they brought them to Zara. And for 4 of those years, she shared that reputation with a man named DeShawn Carter. Voluntarily, because she loved him. Because she thought love meant giving everything you had and trusting the other person to carry it carefully. The first time she really saw DeShawn clearly, not the version she wanted him to be, but the version he actually was a conversation she overheard that she was never supposed to hear. It was 8 months after the gala. She'd stayed late working on a proposal. The office was mostly empty. She was walking back from the printer when she heard voices coming from the small conference room off the main hallway. DeShawn's voice, and Trisha Lawson's, the head of HR. The door was slightly open. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then she heard her own name. "Zara's been pushing for more visibility on client calls," Trisha was saying. "She put in a formal request to be listed as lead strategist on the Meridian renewal." A pause. Then DeShawn, quiet and certain. "She's great at the background work, but honestly, Trisha, she doesn't have the polish for client-facing. You know what I mean?" "What do you mean exactly?" "I mean, she's good. She's really good, but she can be a little much, a little rough around the edges. You know how clients are. They want a certain kind of professional." Silence. She's classless in certain settings," DeShawn said. "Not always, but enough to be a liability. I'm just trying to protect the firm." Zara stood in the hallway. She did not move. Classless. He had called her, the woman who had written every strategy that built his career, the woman who ironed her blazers by hand because she took professionalism seriously, the woman who had given him years of her mind and her trust and her love. Classless. She walked back to her office. She closed the door. She sat down. And for the first time since she was a little girl watching her daddy drive away in the dark before sunrise, she cried. I need you to drop something in the comments right now. Just type, I see her, if you've ever given someone everything and gotten disrespect in return. Just those 3 words. And let's see how many of us have been there. She cried for 20 minutes. Then she washed her face. Then she opened a new document on her laptop. At the top, she typed 3 words. The exit plan. This is where the story changes. Because some people, when they are wounded like that, when the person they trusted most takes their sacrifice and turns it into a joke behind closed doors, some people collapse. Some people go quiet and stay quiet. Some people convince themselves that maybe he was right, maybe I am too rough, maybe I should make myself smaller. Zara Mitchell did not do any of those things. Zara went cold, not angry, not bitter, cold, calculated, strategic. She started keeping records, every email, every presentation she drafted, every strategy document with her digital footprint on it, is every late-night message DeShawn had sent asking for her work. She compiled it all, carefully, systematically, in an encrypted folder on a personal drive. She said nothing to DeShawn. She continued showing up, continued working, continued smiling in meetings. She was by every observable measure exactly the same person she'd always been. But she had turned a corner she would never turn back from. She ended the relationship quietly 3 weeks later. No scene, no explosion. She sat across from him at the kitchen table in the apartment they shared. She'd been paying more than half the rent for 2 years, something she'd normalized without examining. And she said calmly, I think we should end this. DeShawn blinked. Where is this coming from? It's been coming for a while. Zara, I'm not angry. I'm not here to fight. I need to go be who I actually am. And I can't do that here. He stared at her for a long moment. Is this about the visibility thing? Did Trisha say something? She looked at him. She didn't tell him what she'd heard. She said simply, no, this is about me. She was out of the apartment in 2 weeks. She moved into a 1-bedroom across town. Small, quiet, hers. She put her mother's words on a sticky note on her bathroom mirror. Know your worth before someone else tries to price you. She looked at it every morning. The exit plan had 2 phases. Phase 1, document everything and build a parallel portfolio, a body of work that was indisputably, demonstrably hers. Phase 2, leave Elevate Media Group and take that portfolio somewhere it would be recognized. She executed Phase 1 over 6 months. In that time, she also did something that would change everything. She reached back out to Marcus Webb, the investor from the gala, not through a formal channel, but through a mutual contact in Atlanta's creative community. She sent him a brief professional email with a single attached document, a case study she'd written under her own name, analyzing the Meridian campaign from inception to execution, her analysis, her strategy, her name. She didn't ask for anything in the email. She just said, I thought this perspective might interest you. Marcus Webb read it on a Thursday night. He called her on Friday morning. Who are you? He said. I mean, I know who you are on paper, but who are you? And Zara told him. All of it. Not the personal parts, not DeShawn, but the work, the real story of the work. Now, the ideas that had been presented as someone else's, the strategies that had built careers she'd received no credit for. Marcus listened. When she finished, he said, I want to make you an offer. He was in the process of acquiring Elevate Media Group, had been quietly negotiating for 8 months. The deal would close within the year. And when it closed, he needed someone to run it, someone he could trust, someone who actually understood the machinery of the place from the inside, someone with vision, not borrowed vision, not curated vision, but the real, original, hard-won thing. I want you to be CEO, Marcus said. Zara was quiet for 10 seconds. Then, I'm going to need that in writing. Marcus laughed. I expected nothing less. Let me tell you what it costs to become who you need to be. Not money, not time. Honest, those are the easy currencies. The real cost is the version of yourself you have to leave behind. Zara spent the 8 months between Marcus Webb's offer and the closing of the acquisition in a kind of focused silence that her mother later described as the quietest I've ever seen anyone become right before they explode. She didn't tell anyone at Elevate what was coming, not Kendrick, though she suspected he knew something was shifting, because Kendrick always knew. Not her colleagues, not DeShawn. She came in every day, she did her work. She was professional and present, and, from the outside, completely unremarkable. Inside, she was preparing. She took every executive leadership course Marcus's team recommended. She sat with lawyers for 40 hours learning the acquisition structure. She studied the financials of Elevate Media Group with the same precision she'd once brought to client strategies. Except now she wasn't building someone else's career. She was building the foundation of her own. She hired a coach, Dr. Renee Price, a black woman from Memphis who had spent 20 years guiding executives through transitions, who told her in their first session, "The biggest mistake leaders make when they come from pain is they lead from the wound. You can't do that. You have to lead from the scar." "What's the difference?" Zara asked. "A wound is still bleeding. A scar is healed. It shaped you, but it doesn't control you." Zara wrote that down. She thought about it for days. She had to be honest with herself. She was still bleeding. The word he'd used, classless, it had never fully stopped stinging. And not because she believed it, but because she had loved him when he said it. And loving someone who sees you that way, that's a different kind of hurt. She worked through it. Not quickly, not cleanly, but she worked through it. Drop your city in the comments, seriously. Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, London, Nairobi, wherever you're watching from. We're building a community here. Let me see you. The acquisition closed on a Wednesday in March. The official announcement went out company-wide at 9 a.m. The email listed the new ownership structure, the new board composition, and at the bottom in clean corporate language that betrayed nothing of the story behind it. Effective immediately, Zara Mitchell has been appointed Chief Executive Officer of Elevate Media Group. Zara was in her new office, the corner office on the 42nd floor, the one she'd walked past for 7 years without ever imagining she'd be on the other side of its glass door. When the notifications started coming in, her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then didn't stop. Colleagues she barely knew were congratulating her. Former contacts were reaching out. Her mother called twice in a row and then, when Zara picked up, said nothing for 3 full seconds before dissolving into the most beautiful cry Zara had ever heard. "Daddy would have." "I know, Mama. Ronald Mitchell's baby." "I know." They stayed on the phone together, not saying much, for almost 20 minutes. DeShawn found out through the company email, like everyone else. Zara knew this because she'd thought carefully about how to handle him. And she'd decided nothing special. No heads up. No private conversation in advance. He would find out the same way the receptionist found out, the same way the junior analyst found out, because that was professional, and because she was done managing his comfort at the expense of her own. She heard secondhand that his reaction had been visible, that he'd gone pale reading the email, that he'd had to excuse himself from whatever meeting he was in. She didn't seek out those details. She had work to do. The first all-staff meeting as CEO was scheduled for that Friday. She stood in front of 200 people. People she'd worked alongside, people who'd ignored her contributions, people who'd been kind, people who hadn't, and she spoke for 12 minutes. She talked about vision, about accountability, and about what it meant to build a culture where the person who had the idea got the credit for the idea, full stop. She did not say DeShawn's name. She did not make a speech about the past. She simply said, at one point, "This company has always had great minds. What it hasn't always had is the infrastructure to make sure those minds were seen. We're changing that. Starting now." She looked at no one in particular when she said it, but Kendrick, sitting in the second row, nodded once. The first one-on-one meeting she had with DeShawn was on a Monday, 10 days after the announcement. She scheduled it like any other performance review. Standard 30-minute slot. Her assistant sent the calendar invite. Conference room B, not her office. She'd decided that deliberately. Neutral ground. When he walked in looking like a man preparing for a fight he wasn't sure he'd started, she offered him water. He said no. She sat across from him and opened his file and said professionally, I want to talk about your role going forward. The firm is restructuring the account director positions, and I want to understand what you see as your strongest contributions. DeShawn stared at her. Zara, it's Mitchell in professional settings. Please. A muscle moved in his jaw. You're really going to do this. I'm doing a performance review, she said. This is standard for all senior staff. Come on. DeShawn. She said his name evenly, no heat. I'm going to ask you to stay focused. What do you see as your strongest professional contributions? The silence stretched. Then, the Meridian account, the Carlyle Group acquisition, Can you walk me through your specific contributions to the Meridian campaign? Another pause. He knew what she was doing. She could see him calculating how much to admit, how much to deflect, how much of the architecture between them to acknowledge in this clean, professional room with the fluorescent lights and the water pitcher and the clock on the wall. I led the presentation, he said finally. Who developed the strategy? Silence. DeShawn, who developed the strategy? She watched his face go through 7 things in 4 seconds. It was collaborative, he said. She wrote something in the file. I'd like you to put together a formal document, she said, outlining your contributions to each of the accounts you've led in the past 3 years. Specific, documented contributions. I'll need it by end of week. He looked at her. And if I don't, then I'll make decisions based on what I already know. The room was very still. Zara, Mitchell. He exhaled through his nose. I made mistakes. I know that. She looked at him for a moment. This isn't about mistakes, she said. This is about the future of this firm. I need to know what every person on this team actually does. That's all. Document by Friday. She closed his file. Thank you for your time. He submitted the document on Thursday. She read it carefully. She was honest with herself. The document showed he had real skills. The relationship management, the client-facing instincts, the ability to walk into a room and command it, those were genuine. Those were his. What was not his was the intellectual architecture behind every campaign he'd ever claimed as his own. She forwarded the document to her legal team. She forwarded her own archive, the encrypted folder she'd been building for 2 years, to the same team. She let them sort out what was what. Comment Zara right now if you've been quietly building while someone else was loudly taking credit. Let me see how many of you are out there. 3 weeks later, DeShawn was given a choice. He could accept a reassigned role, a lateral position that removed him from client leadership and placed him in an internal advisory capacity where his skills were genuine, but his ability to claim others' work was structurally impossible. Or he could take a severance package and leave. He chose to leave. She heard he went to a competitor firm in Charlotte. She wished him no harm. Genuinely. That surprised her when she checked inside herself. She'd expected to find something harder there, something sharp and satisfied, but what she found was more like release, like setting down a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd stopped noticing it. She was done with him, not in the way of forgiveness being a gift to the other person, in the way of, you no longer live in the house of my attention. That's a different thing. That's the scar, not the wound. The first major campaign under Zara's leadership was for a national consumer brand. Household name, 8-figure budget. The kind of account that would define what the new Elevate Media Group was going to be. She led it herself. She built a team of 6. And she chose people deliberately. She chose the analyst who'd been passed over for promotion twice because she was too quiet in meetings, but whose written strategy documents were the clearest thinking in the building. She chose the junior copywriter who kept being told his ideas were too cultural for mainstream clients. She chose a data strategist who'd been in the same role for 4 years because no one had bothered to see her. She built a team of people who had been doing the work without the visibility, and she put their names on everything. When the campaign launched, it was credited to the team. Each person listed, each contribution documented. The press release from Elevate Media Group named 6 people and gave specific attribution. The client loved it. The industry noticed. When Marketing Week ran a piece, Elevate Media Group's new CEO is redefining what collaborative looks like. Zara read the article on her phone at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee in her robe, her mother's voice on speakerphone, reading it at the same time. Mitchell's approach centers radical visibility. Claudette read, "Mama, I'm reading it. You've read it 4 times. I'm going to read it 40 more times, Zara Renee Mitchell. You let me have this." Zara laughed, real laughter, the kind that starts in your chest and doesn't have anything to prove. Subscribe to this channel right now, because we are not done telling stories like this one. Stories about people who kept going when keeping going cost them everything. Hit subscribe, tell a friend, share this video. On a Thursday afternoon in late spring, Zara stood at the window of the 42nd floor. Atlanta stretched out below her, the skyline, the expressways braided with traffic, the neighborhoods where people were beginning their evenings, cooking dinner, helping with homework, making plans, carrying weight, finding moments of grace. Somewhere down there, a city bus was making its route. She thought about her father. Tired and done are 2 different things. She hadn't been done. She'd been tired. Lord, she had been tired. The years of invisible work, the years of giving her best thinking to a man who called her classless in the dark, the years of staying small because she hadn't yet understood that small wasn't humility. It was a habit someone else had trained her into. She had been tired, but she had not been done. And now she stood here, in this light, in this office. And with her name on the building's official letterhead and her face on the company website and her team's names on every campaign that left these walls, she thought about what Dr. Renee Price had told her. Lead from the scar, not the wound. She thought about Kendrick, who had watched her for 7 years and believed in something he saw before she fully believed in it herself. She thought about her mother, who had done hair in the kitchen and raised a daughter who would one day run a company. She thought about her father, who had been tired every day of his working life and had never once been done. She turned from the window. She picked up her phone. She called her mother. "Hey, Mama. Hey, baby, you okay?" "Yeah." A pause. "I'm really okay." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "When then you sound different." "I feel different." "Different how?" Zara thought about it. "Like myself," she said. "I feel like myself." That night, she went home to her apartment. Still small, still quiet, still hers. She made jerk chicken the way her mother had taught her, patience being the main ingredient, heat and time doing the work that rushing never can. She ate at her kitchen table with no television on. She sat with the silence. And the silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything she'd survived. Full of every late night and every sacrifice. In every moment she'd swallowed her pride and kept going anyway. Full of her father's steady eyes and her mother's proud hands and Mr. Delaney's voice saying, "You have a mind," and Kendrick's nod in the front row. Full of the woman she had become because she refused to become anything less. She never boasted. Not once. Not in a speech, not in an interview, not in a meeting where she easily could have let the story of DeShawn Carter serve as the backdrop to her own triumph. She didn't, because she understood something now that she hadn't always understood. The triumph was never about him. It was never about the person who underestimated you. It was about who you chose to become after they did. He had called her classless. She had built a class act. Those were not related. That's the thing about people who count you out. They think they're writing your story. They're not. They're barely a footnote. The real author was always you. If this story meant something to you, drop "classless no more" in the comments. And share this video with someone who is in the middle of their building season right now. Someone who's tired but not done. Someone who needs to see that the room can tilt in your favor. And subscribe to this channel. We tell the whole truth here. Every time. The end. Or, depending on where you are in your own story, the beginning. Zara Mitchell never went back to being invisible. Not because the world finally saw her, but because she finally stopped hiding. There's a difference, and you know exactly which one matters.